Borrowing in super has become a very popular strategy with self-managed super funds since its introduction back in September 2007.
We see more and more self-managed super funds using borrowing, but there are some traps that you do need to be aware of.
When first introduced, superannuation borrowing was done using what was then called an instalment warrant, which was somewhat confusing and technical.
That's right, Ian. The super laws have now changed from the 7th of July 2010, and borrowing inside super is now referred to as a limited recourse borrowing arrangement.
Even though the laws for borrowing in super has changed again in 2010, there were only a few changes that were really significant from the original legislation.
So Ian, what assets can I buy when I want to borrow in super?
The answer is quite simple, Aaron. Any assets that a super fund can pay cash for, it can use to borrow.
There are 4 basic conditions when borrowing using super. 1. The borrowing must be used for the acquisition of an asset. 2. The asset must be held on trust. 3. The borrowing must be of a limited recourse nature. And 4. When the debt is fully repaid, the trustee of the super fund borrower has the automatic right to have that asset transferred.
A limited recourse loan is when, if the borrower, the super fund, does not repay its loan, the only asset the lender can sell to get its money back is the asset that has been bought by the super fund borrower. The lender has no claim over the other assets of the super fund.
So Ian, tell me a bit more about the borrowing laws.
Well, when your super fund borrows, it must buy a single acquirable asset. That is, it must buy one asset only. However, a collection of identical assets qualifies as a single acquirable asset. For example, Aaron, 1,000 Telstra shares is a single acquirable asset. A collection of several different shares is not.
The asset purchased by the super fund using borrowings must be held on trust as shown in the diagram. This bare trust does nothing except hold the asset on trust for the borrowing super fund.
All activities relating to the acquired asset operate from the self-managed super fund. The bare trust does nothing other than hold the asset on trust. It does not have a tax file number or an ABN. All income is deposited into the super fund bank account and all expenses, including loan repayments, are paid from there too.
Any lending from a party apart from a traditional lender, such as a bank, must be conducted on commercial terms.
A limited recourse borrowing arrangement bare trust structure now only allows for you to have one single acquirable asset. When the asset is repaid, title to the asset passes to the borrowing super fund.
There is no capital gains tax or GST implications for the transfer of this asset to the super fund. However, with stamp duty, you need to be careful as different states have different laws in respect to duty. Get the right advice before you proceed with a borrowing.
The lender can only use the single acquirable asset as security. If the borrowing fund does not pay its loan, then it defaults. When this happens, it's only the single acquirable asset that can be used to repay the lender. This is why you will see the banks obtaining personal guarantees to protect them from any shortfall in the value of the asset in the event of a default.
The super fund can repay capital off the loan using the income from the asset acquired, contributions made by the members of the fund, and other income earned by the fund's other assets that it holds.
A key change from 7 July 2010 is the ability for a super fund to be able to refinance any existing debt.
And a super fund can borrow from a traditional bank, but it can also borrow from the fund members, a company or a trust operated by the members of the fund. And it can also borrow from a relative or a friend of members if they actually choose to do so.
Any lending from a party apart from a traditional bank must be conducted on an arm's length basis. A key attraction of limited recourse borrowing arrangements is the ability to buy property. Many business owners use this strategy to acquire commercial property in which to operate their own businesses.
That's right, Ian. There are many other rules that affect borrowing in super. You can, for example, borrow to develop property. However, the rules in doing so are quite detailed and complex.
You can read further about this strategy on our website.
You should make sure that you get good advice from a superannuation specialist before thinking about any super fund borrowing. This advice is to best come from an SMSF specialist advisor.